But before most of these jets came into service, the first moves of the Cold War had started, when the Russian leader, Stalin, cut all road, rail and canal links between West Germany and its capital city, Berlin. The Western Allies, Britain, the US and France, were left with two alternatives. They could let Stalin have Berlin, or they could supply it by air. And supplies meant everything: food, machinery, medical supplies, coal, petrol, oil. And Berlin's population of 2 million was the equivalent of 2 modern-day Birminghams. So another major theme of Royal IAT 98 celebrated the 50th anniversary of the greatest air supply operation the world has ever known, the year-long Berlin Airlift. For this historical reenactment, Fairford's airfield became first RAF Wunstorf, one of the mounting bases for the airlift. No less than 7 DC3s showed the stream takeoffs that in 1948 frequently went on 24 hours a day. But it wasn't just DC3s, Dakotas as the RAF called them. There was also an elegant 4-engine DC4, no doubt looking rather more presentable than when they were carrying coal and oil into Gatow. And as well as that, well, some people will tell you that this is the most beautiful big piston-engined aircraft there's ever been, the Lockheed C121 Constellation. I say C121 because although Lockheed designed it as a civil airliner for long-range domestic routes within the US, this particular aircraft started flying with the Air Force's Military Air Transport Service, MATS, in 1948. She arrived in MATS just in time for the Berlin Airlift, and she was immediately put to use flying supplies across the Atlantic and into bases like Wunstorf. So it was a particular pleasure to see her as part of Royal IAT's Berlin Airlift celebration. The more so because there are only 5 Connies left flying in the world, and none of them is based in Europe. She has an interesting history. After Air Force service, she was used as an insecticide sprayer for Canadian forests. And then John Travolta bought her. He intended to refurbish her, never actually got round to it, but her present owner, Vern Rayburn, did. And just look at the results. Isn't she gorgeous? Which is not to detract from the elegance of the DC4, the C-54 Skymaster in military terms. This one is used to remind people these days of what luxury travel was like in the 1940s and 50s. And indeed, during the run-up to the air show and afterwards, she was giving luxury charter rides to all and sundry. But her part in the Berlin Airlift reenactment was to represent the great importance of the DC4's contribution. Because although the twin-engine DC3s were vital, they just weren't big enough. And it was only the advent of aircraft like the DC4 and the British Yorks and Hastings that made the whole airlift fully practical.
This is the last DC4 that was ever produced. It came off the production line in Santa Monica in California on the 4th of August 1947. It was delivered new to South African Airways then. South African Airways introduced it onto the Springbok service to London immediately, and it has served with South African Airways until 1965, when they were sold to the South African Air Force, where it served for another 25 years, and for the last 5 years it's been operating with the South African Airways historic flight again. During the Berlin Airlift, 52 of these aircraft formed the backbone and carried most of the necessities for the 2 million people that were stuck in Berlin, from mainly Wiesbaden Air Force Base and also Frankfurt Main. And the DC3s flew more from the other Air Force bases in West Germany to Gatow Airport in Tegel, whereas the DC4s and the C-54s flew mainly into Tempelhof Airport.
Although there are still a few DC4s left flying, in addition to Flippy Vermeulen's elegant machine, none of the larger British types is still in airworthy condition. But here the archive pictures of the AVRO York demonstrate that it too was present in large numbers. Back to the air show, and having started with the stream takeoffs from Wunstorf, Fairford's airfield has now become Gatow in the centre of Berlin, and the stream of landing aircraft is going on at the same time intervals. The pattern was strictly regulated. There was no room for error. If an aircraft missed its approach, it had to fly back to where it came from. There was no way it was allowed to go round the pattern and try again. As one aircraft was turning off the runway, so the next one was on short finals to land. The whole thing became known as the String of Pearls, because that's what it looked like whether you saw it in the air or on a radar screen. Although some of these DC3s are in their modern paint schemes, because yes, they're still in commercial use today, some have been repainted for the celebration. This is the standard RAF Transport Command colour scheme of the time. After landing, the long taxi pattern into the places where they're going to unload their precious supplies. But all the while, the landings continue. The airlift kept Berlin going for 11 months, until in May 1949 the Soviet Union lifted the blockade. But the airlift itself kept going until that September, and in that 15-month period more than 2.25 million tons of supplies were brought into the beleaguered city, in more than 277,000 return flights. It was the biggest air supply operation there's ever been, but it worked thanks to the aircraft and to the pilots. When the aircraft eventually arrive at their parking spots, they're met by appropriately vintage vehicles for the unloading.